All right, so here we go. So we're back again, and we are on part two of the Antichrist. And man, it's already October, what, 17th it is, 2019. So we looked at the Antichrist last week, and so what we'll do is we'll have Ben open us up in prayer, and then we'll do a quick overview of what we kind of looked at last week, and then we'll get through the rest of it. Just by way of announcement, Maya, she made a suggestion that I thought was a good one. She said, "Can you do a 2-hour class where you cover like 6 key areas in the Bible for believers, and like an advanced Bible doctrine class,
Sure.
so that we could take it and give it to other people?" So I was like, "Wow, that's an excellent idea." So Maya up in New York, thank you for that idea. So we have come up with a preliminary outline. And I think what we'll call the class, which I'm going to try to squeeze in before we start the book of Revelation sometime in probably December at this point, late November, because we got to do the Halloween 2-week special, and then we got to do a couple of other things. But the 6 topics I think that we're going to go with, and I send out messages on our Facebook page, and by the way, I included photographs from our last street evangelism outing, and I tagged both you, Steve, and you, Ben. Did you see it?
I've been like flying all over the place,
Okay.
but not yet.
Do you go on Facebook?
I will. I haven't seen that though.
But so I tagged. I just want to make sure you guys are getting your notices. So I
Yeah.
tagged both of you, so you should get
Yeah.
a notice in your
I'll check. I haven't
your
noticed
note
yet.
box,
Yeah.
and it says you were tagged in a photograph, and then you can go on it and like or whatever. I put a bunch of photos
Or
of
accept the
YouTube
tag.
specifically.
Yeah.
So yeah. But at least it'll take you to the picture so you can look at it. You
Sure.
don't have to put it on your wall or anything like that, but it should alert you that, hey, somebody put you in a photograph. So that's on our South Beach Gospel Ministries Facebook page. You guys out there in internet land, check, a couple of times a week, because I usually try to add stuff up, on Friday nights, Sunday afternoon I might put something up there, and in the middle of the week. So check that out. But to getting back to the suggestion that Maya made us, was for a class for people who are already saved, so that they can learn how to take the key information and give it to the people. So she's very evangelical minded, and I think that was a great idea on her part. So I think what we're going to be calling it is Equipping the Saints with the Word series. And so masterclass number 1, here's the topics that I propose, and you guys can give me some input either through our Facebook page or text me or whatever. But I think that the topics, if I had to boil it down to 6 in a 2-hour format, it will give us about 20 minutes per topic. And so this is what I've come up with. Point 1, or topic number 1, and this will all be in one Bible study.
Yeah.
And since it'll be recorded and available on YouTube, you can go back and look at it as many times as possible. And so people like Maya can say, "Oh, I didn't understand that part about the Antichrist." She can go back and look at it as many times as necessary, and then be able to take it to unbelievers and explain it. Because she was saying, well, you got hundreds of hours of teaching, you've got the Antichrist up there, which we're going through now, and we've gone through a couple of times, so we already have like 5 or 6 teachings over the course of the past years on the Antichrist, each about 2 hours long. So that would be, 12 hours, so it would be very tough for somebody to dedicate 12 hours on one topic and then go try to explain that to someone. So
Right.
what the goal of this sort of master class, advanced, Bible doctrine class will be to melt it down to the key areas. And it's tough for me. I had to discipline myself because I could talk for hours. Been that way since a kid. That's why I went to law school instead of, getting a PhD or in molecular biology or something like that. But it'll force me to limit each topic to 20 minutes, but it'll make it more easily digestible for you guys so that you can take it and then give it to the people that aren't saved, people who are on the fence, people who are like, wanting to know, why do you guys believe this? Or what do you mean about the rapture? What is that? I don't remember ever hearing about that. So 6 topics, topic 1, and we'll kind of go sequentially. I'll prepare an outline for it, which I'll make available. By the way, I did an update to the Antichrist outline that we're looking at now, and I was able to copy and paste it to our Facebook page, so anybody out in internet land, you have a printer, you can just go to your laptop, and then you go on our Facebook page, and then you just click on the PDF that I put in one of our most recent announcements, and then you should be able to print it directly from there, and it'll give you like a 16-page outline on the Antichrist with all the verses and all the explanations for those of you that kind of want to follow along at home or go back and look at the videos from this week and last week in your own spare time and have the outline with you. You can go along with it and then make notes, and that way you have, instead of trying to sit down and write, 4 hours worth of notes over 2 weeks and then trying to take that and give it to the people, you'll have the outline available. But to get back that class, which we're hoping we'll get in before the end of the year, because Joe Chambers says the rapture might happen on New Year's Eve. So you smoke them if you got them. We're going to have to expend the ammunition that we have available. So here are the tentative proposed topics, 20 minutes apiece, 2 hour long. And the topic number 1, the fall, Genesis chapter 3, with some information about Genesis 1 and 2, the creation of man and woman added in. But as a general rule, topic 1, the first 20 minutes, the fall. Topic 2, the return of the Nephilim. I think that segues right into the flood and what happened and why. And that kind of lays the foundation for some of the stuff we've been talking about with regards to the Antichrist. And how weird is that, this Antichrist God being looking like a human, but not being fully human. So that'll kind of help us out with that. The next topic, the third topic, 70 weeks of Daniel, part 1, which would be the first 69 weeks of the years of Daniel, the time from Artaxerxes Longimanus' decree to Jesus coming to be crucified. That's the first 69 weeks of the year, so we would look at that as a separate unit. And then we would go on, and this was suggested by Maya, the Olivet Discourse, which is Matthew 24, maybe the most important single Bible prophecy chapter in both the Old and the New Testament, where Jesus is giving hints about not only the second coming, but the rapture of the church as well. Both of them included right there in the Olivet Discourse of Matthew 24. So that would be topic number 4. Again, that would be a 20-minute. And then the last 2 topics, well, can't have a Bible study without the rapture.
That's it.
Our blessed hope. So I think that I put it in what I felt would be as chronological order, sequential order, so it will kind of make sense.
Sure.
So we would have the rapture would come next, and then finally we would end with 70th week of Daniel, which is the 70 weeks of Daniel, part 2,
Sure.
the 70th week of Daniel, which is also the Great Tribulation period, which also can't happen until 2 events happen first. First being
Apostasy of the church.
apostasy in the church, and then the departure of the church in the rapture. And so, since we will already have covered the rapture, you'll know what we're talking about. After the rapture comes what? The 70th week of Daniel. And guess who comes along during the 70th week of Daniel?
Antichrist.
The Antichrist, our topic for tonight. So, on that note, we segue right into Ben opening us up in prayer, and then we'll jump right into the Antichrist. So, there's a lot of detail that we're going to get tonight, and we got last week, but we'll be able to melt that down and try to make that bite-sizable so that people like Maya can take it and give it to their friends and neighbors and relations and people that they see. And so that's good. I'm going to try to get some evangelical materials that can be handed out in the way of chick tracts and the like, so that those of you guys that are out there in TV land can do your part in the long war against God and defense of the faith by, passing out tracts as well. So I'll be able to ship those out to you guys when I'm able to get those, and when they're all set, then you guys just give me an address and I'll ship them to you. Maya's already given me her address in New York.
He's ready.
Ship my stuff to this address in New York City, and I will take it from there. So that's a great attitude, and because that's really what the church is supposed to be doing, evangelism.
Right.
After we get saved, you don't just sort of just sit around and wait for the rapture. You are hoping and waiting for the rapture, but in the meantime, you occupy until I come, Jesus says. You occupy by what? By going into areas of demonic stronghold and telling people the gospel. You're not trying to build buildings, you're not trying to provide clean drinking water, you're not trying to resolve the homeless problem, you're not trying to resolve the pothole problems in the city streets and South Beach especially. You're trying to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ so as many people as possible can get saved and avoid spending eternity in hell, which was the whole point of Jesus coming and dying on the cross. So that's the 6 topics, and I'll get that outline together, and as soon as we get a break in the action here, we'll squeeze that in, I think, just before we start the book of Revelation, which, is a nice long series and really detailed. So with that, Ben, if you could go ahead and open us up, we can start up with the Antichrist.
Lord, we are so incredibly blessed, and millions have died in order for us to have your most holy and true word. And really, Lord, the pure, preserved Bible is all the information that we really need. And so we are so blessed to be able to get together this evening in order to study it together, look at as we're at the end of the end times, to look at the Antichrist specifically. We know that he's not going to be revealed while we're still here, but it's very important for us to know what he's about, particularly as it pertains to spiritual deception. So, Lord, we are so blessed to be here. Lead us, inspire us, guide us. We're just in love with your word, and we need your help to study this most incredible part of your prophecies for the end days. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right. So just by way of review, now Ben was out of town last week. You were up in Boston last week, right, Ben? So just by way of overview, we're going to give the key verses we looked at to open the door to the Antichrist, and we'll try to review quickly some of the stuff that we talked about, the origins of the Antichrist. That gave us Genesis chapter 3. We touched upon the Nephilim a little bit, and we touched upon Nimrod, the forerunner of the Antichrist. And we also talked about, after that, the rise of Semiramis, the wife of Nimrod, who then took the mythos of Nimrod being the sun god king who died, was resurrected in the form of the sun, and then impregnated her with a beam of sunlight, and impregnated her supernaturally without sexual intercourse, causing her to give birth to her son Tammuz, who was a forerunner and a type of the Antichrist, the miracle virgin-born God-man child who would later be worshipped as God. Sort of a mimicking of what we see in the gospel story of the birth of Jesus Christ by way of a virgin. And this whole Freemasonic legend dates all the way back to ancient Babylon, and is depicted really right on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., in the Capitol Rotunda, which is the impregnated belly of Semiramis, and the Washington Monument, which is the obelisk right in the center of the mall, which is the phallic or phallus of the deceased Osiris, who was really Nimrod. Egyptians renamed him Osiris, who came back to life as the sun god, so that on certain occultic holidays the sun would shine off the top of the Washington Monument, which was marble plated in gold, and it would shoot a beam of light through one of the porticos on the belly or on the dome of the Capitol Rotunda, and light up a fresco on the ceiling of the Capitol Rotunda. And when we did this a couple of years ago, when you guys pulled up, when Ingrid was here, she was great. She pulled up the picture of the ceiling of the Capitol Rotunda, which showed a painting called The Apotheosis of George Washington, the father of our country. Apotheosis means a man turning into God. It's sort of fancy Greek way of saying a man becomes a god. And it showed him doing the sort of satanic and Freemasonic symbol of as above, so below, one hand up, the other hand down, and he's doing that as he's sitting on a throne, and he's becoming Zeus, the god of heaven. And so, again, we see all of that laid out on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., which shows that we are amongst the most free Masonic countries on earth. And so we have that tension there. Christian pilgrims versus our leaders who are steeped in occultism and Freemasonic imagery. And so we kind of looked upon that. So Semiramis, Nimrod, and then we kind of will trace how that goes all the way through to the present day. And we would pick it up with where we were at with Revelation chapter 17 and 18. We hadn't gotten to that, how ancient mystery Babylon would come back again as predicted by John the Revelator. But to start us out, let's look at the introductory verses that we looked at last week. If you could, 1 John chapter 2, verse 18, Steve. And then you can flip over to John, Gospel of chapter 5, verse 43 for me. Steve?
1 John chapter 2,
Yep, verse
Verse
18.
Little children, it is the last time, and as ye have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time.
All right, so, that verse tells us that it's the last hour, and this was written 2,000 years ago, so it's the last few minutes now. If 2,000 years ago was the last hour, now we're in the last minutes. And he says, little children, it's the last hour, as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming. So there's an individual, that's a preposition there that tells us there's going to be one specific individual who has many titles in both the Old and New Testament. The title of the outline of tonight's and last week's teaching was Antichrist, the Prince that shall come. That comes, of course, from, who's a smart A student here?
That's Richard Anderson's book, the...
But where does Sir Richard Anderson get Becoming Prince?
From,
Yeah, it's
from
a
Daniel.
great book.
I'm sorry, from Daniel.
Yeah. Dan, you remember what chapter?
9?
Daniel 9, that gives us our 70th week of Daniel. The people of the Prince that shall come will destroy the temple and whatever. And so that's one of the titles, the Prince that shall come. Daniel also calls him the little
Horn.
The little horn. Yep. He's also known as the son of
Perdition.
the son of perdition, the son of destruction. Only two people in all of the Bible are referred to as the son of perdition. The Antichrist, and the other person is Judas Iscariot, which causes you to question, is there something
Judas?
going on in the genetic background of both Judas and the Antichrist? Because son of destruction kind of almost suggests that you are damned, and there's some verses in Daniel that might support that you're damned before you were even incarnated. And that would not be consistent with Bible doctrine which relates to the sons of Adam, daughters of Eve, the children of men. We always have a chance to be saved, and it's always up to us whether we want to go to heaven or not. And God just acts on our choice. But if Antichrist and maybe Judas Iscariot himself are not fully Adamic, meaning that when God in the Old Testament, remember he told King Saul, kill all of the, who were they?
I don't know.
I forgot which one of they tried. Kill the animals, kill all
the children, the women, everything. Yeah.
And when King Saul didn't, God sent the prophet, and I guess it was Samuel, the prophet at the time. He says, "What be this bleating of the animals in my ear that I hear?" Look, Saul says, "Oh no, I decided to save the best of the cattle and let some of the women live and be slaves, and some of their sons be." And Saul was, excoriated. He said, God told you to do what he said to do, not what you think to do. And, so at this point, some Bible scholars have suggested that these tribes had Nephilim genes in them, and that Saul's disobedience to God allowed those Nephilim genes to spread and to move, and eventually move into some of the sons of Shem, who are, later became the Arab tribes that were the cousins of the Jews. And that maybe, who knows, possibly Judas may have had some kind of a genetic background. Certainly I've read an argument that would suggest that in the book of Esther, let's see if you guys can remember the name of the guy. Well, Mordecai. Mordecai. Somebody has suggested that Mordecai and Haman, and that maybe his genes weren't quite right. Haman, and that's why he was trying to kill all the Jews, and that almost the entire Jewish race was wiped out by this one person who was plotting against the Jews while they were in captivity in Persia. And this has been argued by some as is a result of the disobedience of King Saul. When you don't do what God says to do, and you do your own thing, even if you have good intentions, sometimes there are disastrous consequences that lead all the way into the future. So anyway, we got into the New Testament. John tells us in his first epistle, first letter to the church, that the Antichrist is coming, and many Antichrists many who were doing the work of the Antichrist have come. And I think he's making reference to Nimrod and maybe some others. General Seleucus was the grandfather of one of the most horrific of the rulers of the Seleucid Empire, the guy who went into the temple and slaughtered a pig on the altar of the rebuilt temple. And it had to be cleansed and undefiled, which is where we get Hanukkah and the Festival of Lights. And that was
Antiochus Epiphanes.
Antiochus Epiphanes, grandson of Seleucus, who was one of the 4 generals of Alexander the Great when the empire broke up. So, yes, John is saying in 1 John that, hey, the Antichrist is coming. That's how we know it's the last hour. He said a little earlier in the Gospel of John, Ben, chapter 5 of the Gospel of John, verse 43.
I am come in my Father's name, and ye receive me not. If another shall come in his own name, him ye will receive.
Now, who's speaking there? Well, that's none other than Jesus himself. And Jesus is saying, I'm coming in my Father's name. And he's talking to the Jewish religious leaders of his time. But you will not receive me. But then he prophesies 2,000 years in advance. I believe, he says, but if another comes in his own name, him you will receive. Many Bible prophecy scholars suggest that this verse 43 of the Gospel of John chapter 5 is Jesus predicting that the Antichrist will in some way be able to counterfeit himself as the Messiah. Some have gone so far as to suggest that he's Jewish or partially Jewish, and that's why the Jews, would the Jews follow a non-Jewish Messiah? Probably not. But then there's arguments that, wait, Daniel chapter 9 seems to suggest that the Antichrist comes from the revived Roman Empire. So isn't he, at the very least, European, if not Italian? Maybe not, because there's another verse in the Old Testament that, in fact, a couple of them, that suggests that the Antichrist will be an Assyrian. And Assyria is actually modern-day Iraq. And guess what big, important city in the Old Testament was located in Iraq, which was also referred to as Assyria?
Babel.
The city of Babylon. The city of Babylon, which was founded by none other than the original forerunner of the Antichrist by the name of Nimrod. That's where we get the term, you Nimrod. And it wasn't because Nimrod, the founder, he was the founder of the first great world empires, the Babylonian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, the city of Babel, or Babylon, the city of Iraq, the city of Akkad. He's the founder of the Akkadian people, the Babylonian people, and so he's a great ruler. And the term Nimrod has become sort of a not a euphemism, but a what would be the literary term? Ben, you are a writer. It's used now as a way, an idiom, if you will, for not being wise. It's not because you're stupid, because you don't know what stupid's for. It's because you decided to become a God man, and in doing so, damned your soul to hell. And so now that term Nimrod, which is a biblical term actually, is what, are you stupid? You Nimrod, not very wise to do things like.
The context still holds like that.
Right.
Maybe Nimwit is parallel.
I think that one is dim, the light is down, dimwit, Nimrod. So these are real actors and individuals from the Bible. But Steve, just real quick, 1 John chapter 4, verse 3, John, a couple of chapters later, after telling the church that, hey, this is after, I believe, written right after he got off the island of Patmos. He wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. He says in verse 3 of John chapter 4,
and every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is that spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it should come, and even now already it is in the world.
I think that underscores the fact that Antichrist isn't just a human being. He's not just a flesh and blood man. He is flesh and blood, but he isn't just a man. He's also a spirit. A spirit can't die. The spirit of Satan himself will eventually indwell the body of the Nephilim hybrid I believe the Antichrist to be. So the spirit of Antichrist was already in existence before the biogenetic body or avatar, which Satan will occupy in his biogenetic son, the Antichrist. We learned from Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, that God pronounced back in the Garden of Eden that the Antichrist would be actually a biogenetic descendant of Satan himself. Because in the same transitory clause or phrase, God reveals to Adam and Eve and to Satan that the seed of the woman, meaning a virgin-born God-man, would come to crush the head of Satan, the serpent. And then God also says, I'm going to put enmity or warfare between your seed and her seed. And if her seed is talking about the virgin-born God-man, Jesus Christ, who wasn't just a spirit or an idea or a meme, but actually a flesh and blood living being who was an actual genetic descendant of Adam because he was a real human being through the genetics of Eve without Adam's DNA in the form of spermatozoa of a man. Maybe the sin is carried on the Y chromosome. I don't know how that works, but women don't have a Y chromosome. God X'd out the Y chromosome and used the Holy Spirit to provide that to fertilize the egg, and Jesus, boom, was born as a real XY human being, a male. Antichrist then too must also be a real biogenetic descendant of the person who's in that transitory clause that God was referring to, who was the serpent, who we know is actually the prince of the power of the air, none other than Satan. So Satan has a biogenetic descendant. We call him the Antichrist. He's also known as the son of perdition, the prince of darkness, a number of different titles. So we looked last week at Zechariah, and Zechariah chapter 11, we saw that Zechariah referred to him as the idol shepherd, and we know that he will somehow have one eye put out, and that this is how we get the sort of Illuminati symbolism we see in the entertainment industry of the one eye symbol where you cover one eye up. It's kind of a hand signal, gang sign to show that, hey, I'm in with the Luciferians because I'm doing the cool one eye symbol, or I'm doing the AOK sign, which is actually when you look at it superimposed, it's a 666. If you drew 3 sixes and kind of shifted them apart, the AOK sign is also considered by many in the occult to be an indication that, hey, I'm in with the Antichrist. And, using the peace sign is sort of an ancient, actually, occultic term. The twin horns or the twin horns that way, it's the sign of the Baphomet, or the horned god of ancient paganism, which is really none other than Satan. He goes under many disguises: the green man, the horned god, Pan, these things. So we looked at that last week. We looked at the origins of the Antichrist, dating all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, the seed of the serpent. And then we jumped into Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, which gives us the Nephilim. So let's run through that real quick, Steve. It won't hurt us. Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, gives us the reason for the flood of Noah. And the flood of Noah was because there were hybridized humans created by fallen angels, which is what Satan is, who were able to accomplish sexual intercourse with women, impregnate them, and sire a race of human-like beings who were not human beings, but only appeared in human-like form, only bigger, stronger, and better, collectively referred to as the Nephilim. Steve.
And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, that the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown.
And that word there, giant, in the King James Version in the Hebrew is Nephilim, from the Hebrew root Nephal, which means to fall. Nephal means to fall. When you add the Hebrew im, the suffix to the word, it pluralizes it so that the phrase now becomes the fallen ones. The fallen ones were sired by fallen angels who came down from the first estate, the Father's house in heaven, the third heaven, down into the atmosphere of the earth and eventually onto the earth, impregnated women and created a race of what turned out to be giant people, but the term actually literally means the fallen ones. And when it's translated into the Greek Septuagint, interestingly enough, the Holy Spirit would cause them to use the word gigantes, which doesn't mean giant, they're giant, but doesn't mean that. Gigantes means, or from the Greek root gigos, Giggas, means earthborn. Why would you be calling a human being earthborn? All humans are born.
True.
There is, until we get some space station out in space somewhere where we're colonizing the stars, which we won't be able to do before the rapture occurs. Every human's been born on Earth. These individuals were unique in that their forebears, their parent, their father, was not from the earth, but rather had fallen down to the earth from the third heaven. And hence, the children were known distinctively as the earthborn fallen ones, because their parents, their fathers, were fallen angels kicked out of heaven who were able to cohabit with women on the earth, which made them unique, which was why they got the distinctive name. Then we pop over a few verses, Steve, Genesis 6 and 9, we find out the reason for the flood wasn't just because God was a surly, cantankerous old man who was tired of sin, because if he was just wiping out, sin, then he'd have to wipe out New York City today, Las Vegas, South Beach, and all these things. This was a specific reason. We see Genesis chapter 6, verse 9.
These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God.
And that perfect in his generations. Generations in Hebrew is the Hebrew word tamayim, which means unblemished. So it doesn't mean that Noah was sin-free, because if he was, he could be the Messiah for us, and we wouldn't need God's Son to come and die on a cross. We could have had Noah die drowning in the flood, and we would have all been saved. But no, what that means is his DNA was not contaminated by interbreeding of his mother or grandmother or any of the women up the line from him with fallen angels. He wasn't part Nephilim. So God uses the Holy Spirit to put in Scripture a special important thing about Noah. His DNA was uncontaminated. And then we find out, Steve, in Genesis chapter 6, verse 17.
And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. For under heaven and everything that is in the earth shall die.
So the flood comes as a result of the fallen ones, the Nephilim, coming down to earth and contaminating the human gene pool with the fallen angel DNA, siring a race of human-like beings called the Nephilim. And so God had to wipe out the demonic gene line that was threatening to overcome and subsume the human genome, which was the sons of Adam. And so after that, we find out that, boom, the world has to start all over again. And let me just point you guys out here on our chart. The world has to start all over again after that. And we kind of looked at here is our fall in the Garden of Eden. Right here, Adam and Eve, they fall, they get kicked out of the garden, they start populating the earth with people. The fallen angels see beautiful earth women for the first time, decide to come down from heaven, interbreed with them, and create a line of the Nephilim. The angels are imprisoned in Tartarus, and the Nephilim dominate the earth and began enslaving humans and doing all kinds of terrible things, whereupon God has to send the flood of Noah here on our timeline to preserve the human gene pool. And so Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth, and their wives are the ones that get in the ark of the animals, and the world is destroyed with a flood. When the flood is over, we have God giving the command to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth with little human beings. But after the flood, guess what? There was a man who was a descendant of one of Noah and his sons. He became the first world emperor, and he built an object called the Tower of Babel. And that person is none other than
Nimrod.
Nimrod. And so now let's take a look if we could. I made a little timeline chart that makes it a little bit easier for us to follow. So here's the chart that we kind of made up for you guys. Mystery Babylon, a religious system. We start out with Adam about 4000 BC, about 6,000 years ago. And we have what? The fall. And goddesshood is first introduced where, Steve?
Garden of Eden.
In the Garden of Eden. And who does the introducing and who is it introduced to?
Satan to Eve.
Wow, in the form of the serpent. Eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which God is trying to hide from you. In other words, the basic Herb Walker translation, if you partake of occultic knowledge, occult doesn't mean magic or demonic, it means hidden knowledge. If you partake of the knowledge God's trying to hide from you, you will become the first goddess. There isn't one in the universe, you'll be the very first one. Does that sound like something that would be interesting to you? Absolutely, Eve says. Well, there's a catch though. You gotta get your husband to sign on the line. He won't work with us. He's unreasonable. He'll listen to you though. Is it a deal? Eve signs on. I'll get my husband to do it. He'll do whatever I say. Goddesshood is first offered and introduced into the world in the fall, in the Garden of Eden, in about 4000 BC. And thereupon we have our first act of feminism and our first act of, goodness, dare I say it? Witchcraft. Oh, witchcraft. The wise one. Women who are pursuing a superior role in life through the partaking in occultic knowledge to cause them to ascend into goddesshood, where they can be worshipped. That all began with Eve being tempted and giving into that temptation in the garden. And Adam foolishly went along with it, and by so doing, condemned the entire human race, which was under his authority. And so that requires all people born of Adam to be condemned to hell forever, which is bad news. But the good news is that God was going to send a deliverer, and we found that out in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, where not only is the Antichrist predicted, but Jesus Christ is predicted, the virgin-born God-man. So we move from there to about 2400 BC. About 2400 BC, about 4400 years ago, a flood occurs, the flood of Noah. Why? Because prior to that, in this timeline where Adam, between Noah, the fallen angels came down and sired a race of beings known collectively in the Bible as the Nephilim. We see in the Old Testament that there are different tribes or types or ethnic groups of them. Some are called the Rephaim, which means the dead ones, and the Anakim, which means the chained ones, making reference, I think, to the fact that their dads are fallen angels who are now in prison in chains in Tartarus, waiting to be released at the halfway point of the 78th week of Daniel. The others are called, you've got the Anakim, the Rephaim,
Zamzummim,
the Zumims and the Zamzumins are in there. And so God sends the flood to destroy the genetic line of demonic entities known as the Nephilim. Noah and his 3 sons and their wives, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, survive. And so Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they populate the earth. There's only one race of human beings on the earth, the human race, which is Adamic. But there are lines of non-humans on the earth that God destroyed at the flood with the flood of Noah. But alas, it says there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that, predicting that these Nephilim won't return. But let's take a look at the 3 sons of Noah that were on the ark with him, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Shem, whose descendants now are collectively referred to after his name, only the H is dropped, so instead of calling them the Shemites, they're called Semites. Arabs and Jews are Semitic people, meaning that they directly trace their heritage to the son of Noah named Shem. And we have Ham, or the Hamitic people that come after that, and we have Japheth. Many people believe that the Europeans come from the line of Japheth. Shem, you get the Arabs and the Jews, and the people of color, such as the African countries, come from Ham. Ham, the son of Noah, had a son named Cush. And Cush had a son who was named Nimrod. And that's the person who ends up being very, very important in the Bible. So here's the son of Noah, grandson of Noah, the great-grandson of Noah, who was born about 1700 BC, is Nimrod, between 17 and 1800 BC. And we found out, Steve, that Nimrod is a legendary figure who goes by many different names and titles. Do you know any of them?
Let's see.
Important.
Marduk.
Marduk, yeah. Well, as a lit minor in college, we all had to read an important story,
Gilgamesh.
the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
Gilgamesh was like this giant Superman who would do all kinds of feats of daring do. And so he's also known as Gilgamesh. He's also referred to as Sargon I, Marduk, Bel, Anu. Later, the Egyptians would change that name to fit the Egyptian culture, and they called him Osiris. The Greeks would refer to him as Zeus. So now you take a real live person who the Bible says, we learned in Genesis chapter 10, through occultic and sexual defilement rituals began to become a Nephilim. He found a way through the occult to change his DNA to make him into a god-man, a demonically hybridized Nephilim human. And so, because of that, this really existing person became stuff of lore, stuff of legends, which we found out in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, would be the result of these Nephilim supermen, would become legendary mythological heroes that we get. Greek mythology, Norse mythology, and modern day comic book heroes. Superheroes like Superman, Captain Marvel, or whoever else. Human looking people with superpowers. That relates back to Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. So Nimrod, even after his death, and some people say that he was killed by Noah's son Shem because he introduced abominations as part of a ritualized religion, which would include human blood sacrifice, child sacrifice, pedophilia, and homosexuality. And because the wickedness of the city of Babel, or Babylon, that he founded, Babel literally meaning the gate of God, and it's believed by many that the Tower of Babel, built by Nimrod, was really, it wasn't an observation deck so you could see, oh, look at the beautiful hills of the Shinar Plain.
Yeah.
No, it was a stargate, a high place, so that the fallen angels who had been exiled from the third heaven and were condemned to dwell in the second and first heavens, which is outer space and the atmospheric heavens around the planet Earth, could now have a landing spot and interact with human beings. And in exchange for worship like a god, these fallen angels with advanced technology and knowledge could give that advanced knowledge to human beings, to give them a technological edge over all the other cultures, to give them the chance to rule over the other peoples. And don't we see that with the Incans and the Mayans and the Egyptians? They have all this advanced knowledge of architecture, building these fantastic ziggurats and pyramids. Architecturally, 3,000 years ago, how could they possibly have created these gigantic edifices, or edify, I guess would be the proper way of describing it. When I went to study abroad in Israel for a semester, we actually went to visit the pyramids, and I got a chance to climb up inside. Cheops is the great big pyramid, the biggest of all of them, the largest building on the face of the planet Earth is that pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Cheops. The stones used to create that pyramid were like the size of my condo, They were gigantic, huge chunks of granite, but yet they were set so closely together. And there's no cement, there's no lime, like mortar to keep the bricks together. You put, kind of the glue between there, call it mortar, and you stick them together. But there isn't anything. They're cut so precisely that they are so tightly fit together, you can't slide a piece of paper between them. How could they have had the technology 3,000 years ago to do that? Laser cutters would be required to do that today, unless the fallen angels gave them knowledge of advanced technology that gave them feats of constructive daring do, which is where you get Freemasonic, the sort of social club that we call Freemasonry today really started back then as Freemasonic guilds, possibly using occultic advanced knowledge of architecture obtained from the fallen angels to build super cities, so that certain men who had sworn allegiance to Satan could have dominance over all of the other men. So again, Ham, gives birth to Cush, who gives birth to Nimrod. Shem supposedly eventually kills Nimrod, and then we find out that Nimrod, prior to his death, married a woman by the name of Semiramis, supposedly the most beautiful woman in the world, who was eventually known as the Queen of Heaven, the Virgin Mother, Earth Goddess. She supposedly was able to give birth to her son Tammuz after Nimrod was killed and resurrected as the sun god. And as he was the king of Babylon, he became the first of the dying and resurrected sun god kings. And his son was supposedly the physical reincarnation of the dead Nimrod. And therefore, the mom, who was having an affair with her son, decided to have him killed off so she could inherit the throne and become the Queen of Heaven while sitting on an earthly throne. And then, when she eventually died off, the mythos surrounding her was that she was the Queen of Heaven, the Virgin Mother Earth Goddess, and eventually cultures began referring to her as Gaia. The Egyptians eventually took this woman and called her Isis. The Phoenicians called her Ishtar. The others called her Ashtaroth. And this is the same person, the wife of Nimrod, Semiramis, who became the Queen of Heaven. And today, she's known as, in a pseudo-Christian cult, Roman Catholicism, she's known as the Virgin Mary. That's not the Mary of the Bible that gave birth to Jesus. It is the ancient Babylonian sun goddess, Semiramis, the Queen of Heaven, who was now taking on a different name. And so, shortly after that, Semiramis gives birth to Tammuz, who the Egyptians Egyptianizes the name and calls him what?
Horus.
Horus, the falcon-headed god-man. So yeah, he was Horus, and then the the Greeks finally adopted from the ancient Egyptians their Babylonian-based mystery religion. Mystery Babylon's a religious system, and they changed the name from Horus, which had been Tammuz, and called him what? He was called by the Greeks Apollo. And so we have different names. Baal is one of the names by which he was known. Apollo, Baal, Horus, Tammuz, all of them are the same, and all of them are a type of the Antichrist, the biogenetic son of the sun god king. And Freemasonry adopts that very same mythos and applies it. They have the saying, who weeps for, the widow, widow's son, who will weep for the widow's son? What are they talking about? They're talking about the fact that Semiramis, who was widowed because her husband Nimrod was killed by Shem, the son who eventually founds the Jewish race, the Israelites, she's now a widow, and she has a son, Tammuz. And her only son is killed supposedly by a wild boar, and so thereupon becomes a tradition where at a certain time of the year in the spring, you would make cakes and dedicate them to the mother of Tammuz who had died tragically, and you would weep for Tammuz because you were being sympathetic and empathetic towards Semiramis. So you would bake cakes for Semiramis and weep for her son. This tradition became known as weeping for Tammuz, and we found out by looking in First Chronicles, I think it is, that oh my goodness, what were they doing? They were actually doing the worship of Semiramis, the sun goddess, the Queen of Heaven, in the house of the Lord. And so that's a terrible thing in the Jewish Targums. Gives us a lot of detail about that. If you want to, Steve, you can flip over to Ezekiel chapter 8 and read verses 13 to 16. So while Steve's going there, Semiramis, wife of Nimrod, mother of Tammuz, real people, become mythologized, and she becomes known as the Queen of Heaven. She's later referred to as Gaia, Isis, Ishtar, Ashtaroth. Tammuz later becomes Horus, Apollo, Baal, Ninus, many different names from many different cultures, but the same three real individuals. But Tammuz, who's later Horus, who's later Apollo, is a type of the Antichrist, a real biogenetic descendant of a real entity who was more than just a man. Read that for us if you would, Steve.
Ezekiel 8, 13 to 16. He said unto me, Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Then said he unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn ye yet again, and thou shalt see greater abomination than these. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs towards the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east.
So my gosh, we find that this abomination of worshiping Tammuz and her resurrected sun god, son, Tammuz, is actually occurring in ancient Israel. We find out that Israel comes along and is founded about 1500 BC. So here we are on our timeline chart. Israel comes into existence 1500 BC, which is about 1,000 years after the flood of Noah. Goodness forbid, even that long after, Semiramis, we got Nimrod coming along about 1800 BC. Centuries later, we find out that the worship of Nimrod, his wife Semiramis, the queen of heaven, and their son, supposedly a divine virgin-born God-man, Tammuz, is now incorporated into the temple system in Israel, an abomination of abominations, at least 3 centuries later. And then after that, we find out in 32 AD, about 1,500 years later, the real Messiah, virgin-born God-man is born, Jesus Christ, of which Satan imitates. He's born into the world, and in 32 AD, he's crucified for the sins of the world. Now, the result, the mythos of Babylon is contrasted against and at war with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Just like in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, the seed of the woman is at enmity with the seed of the serpent. God says, I'm going to put enmity, warfare between thy seed, Satan, and her seed, the virgin-born God-man, the Messiah. That's predicted in Genesis chapter 3, 6,000 years ago. And we see it's playing itself out, and it really begins face-to-face about 2,000 years ago after Jesus is born into the world. Now we have the gospel of Jesus Christ introduced into the world and competing against an ancient, even older, and that's what they always argue, right? Oh, doesn't the myth, Semiramis and the Queen of Heaven, all of that's way before Christianity. So because it's older, then it must be truer. Doesn't make sense. But the Mithras religion, Mithraism, worshiping basically the ancient, because Satan knew, he read the Bible. He knew the Messiah was coming. He didn't know when and where, but he knew when, the sign appeared in the heavens. Some people believe that the astrological signs really foretell the gospel in the stars, and that Satan and his stargazing soothsayers could tell God's got that clockwork and Messiah is about to come. They knew that the Messiah was coming. God told him 6,000 years ago in the Garden of Eden. He said, listen, I'm going to send a virgin-born God-man to destroy you. And I'm telling you, thousands of years in advance, so you can sweat it every night and be up all night. Now, he doesn't go to sleep, but, I was going to say, he's going to keep him up late. He's going to be up anyway, but he'll be worrying himself for some 4,000 years before the Messiah actually comes. So, he knew in advance what was coming, so he tried to imitate it. Yep. And he created a counterfeit, Steve. Isn't that what he did?
That was Semiramis, right?
Sure. Semiramis was the counterfeit by which Tammuz, the false Christ, would come into the world. And the pagans would say, since Tammuz worship precedes the birth of Jesus, it must therefore be more true. And so, that we get that with the perverted satanic versions of the Bible that Ben talked about. Because we have copies of the non-Textus Receptus Vaticanus or Sinaiticus extant, meaning in existence now, that are actually older than the oldest copies of the Textus Receptus. That must prove that Vaticanus Sinaiticus is more accurate than Textus Receptus. And the answer is no, not so. That's not logical reasoning. Because one's older doesn't make it truer. It just means that the older satanic texts were never used by people because they knew they were frauds, and so they got, they never got worn out. In this case, God chose to wait until the specific time in the timeline to introduce the Messiah into the world. Because he chose to wait, and Satan tried to beat him to the punch for the counterfeit, doesn't mean the counterfeit is now real. No, absolutely not.
That's
so,
Zeitgeist has pedal.
Say that again.
Zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist.
tries
Yeah.
to peddle that hard.
On YouTube videos, my goodness, it was really big on YouTube around 2009,
Yep.
2010. A movie called Zeitgeist, which that Jesus is really Zeus because the spelling is close to one another. So really, what Jesus is just an imitation of Zeus, and all of this dates back to ancient Babylon, and this is really the sun gods of the Babylonians. So Jesus is a fraud, and what? The Babylonian sun god is the real god?
Yeah.
Nonsense. It is Satan trying to hedge his bets ahead of time. So we got the gospel of Jesus Christ versus the mythos of Babylon and the dying, and here it is laid out. 3 points. Versus Adam, Noah, Ham, Cush, Nimrod gives us the dying and resurrected sun god king, point 1 of the mystery Babylon religious system. 2, the virgin queen of heaven, earth mother goddess, point 2 of the tripartite mystery Babylon false religious system. And the third leg of that false system is the virgin born sun god, prince, son of the sun god, resurrected king, which is really the Antichrist. This eventually transmogrifies itself over the centuries into the Druidism of the ancient Celts. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Druidism spread into Europe eventually, and eventually infected the British Isles, where you had Druidic priests worshiping rocks and trees by killing people's babies. Sacrifice your baby to the rock god, sacrifice your children to the tree god, and we'll make your crops grow and you'll have an abundant harvest. That Druidism was so wicked and so evil that when the Roman Empire eventually spread into Britannia and took over what is now the British Isles and the Emerald Isle of Ireland and Scotland, when the Romans eventually took that over, they found the Druids there. They outlawed Druidism. Even the hardcore, tough guys of the Roman Empire said, this is so barbaric, we're outlawing it in the Roman Empire. And so Druidism, which is really a stylized nature form of Satanism, which includes human blood sacrifice, had to go underground in hiding because the Roman government thought it was too wicked to exist, so it was driven underground and became a secret religious system. And that's how the Babylonian pagan sun god worship with blood sacrifice, pedophilia, homosexuality, went into hiding and became mystery Babylon, because you had to use secret symbols and hand signs and fraternal or signals and all kinds of things to signal to one another that you're part of the in the know crew, but you couldn't say it openly because it was against the law because it was so barbaric. So Druidism eventually works its way into Wicca, which infects the British Isles and becomes very popular in modern-day Great Britain. Wicca is the fastest growing religion alongside Islam. And so Druidism has survived on today. That's why you have Stonehenge. What are these big stone monolithic structures out here in the open British countryside? That's where they used to do human blood sacrifices when the sun was in a certain position in the sky. Time to worship this dying and resurrected sun god king, Nimrod, who is Marduk, who is Baal, who is the green man, and his consort, his wife, the queen of heaven. Let's get the babies together and go to Stonehenge and do human blood sacrifices, because it's now the high holy holiday and the sun is in the Aquarius is in Jupiter, and Jupiter is in Mars, and peace is in the 7th house, and love will rule the stars. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. That's what the song was really all about.
Right.
Stars in certain position, you got to go kill your kids to make your crops grow.
Right.
And so we see Druidism transmogrifying into Wicca, which became witchcraft, and Satanism, etc. So Mystery Babylon religion, to evade detection, incorporated itself eventually into Masonic socialism, clubs, New Age movement, the Eastern mysticism of Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. is really just Babylonian paganism restylized for the people in the Orient who have slightly different culture and slightly different names. Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam even Sufism, which is sort of a mystic form of Islam,
Right.
you'd be shocked and amazed the ties between Islam, Catholicism, and ancient Babylonian paganism for all their talk about being, ritualistically pure and hating false gods. Freemasonry, Roman Catholicism, Mormonism, the Masons, and the Illuminati, the enlightened ones, the intellectual intelligentsia, some of the founding fathers were involved. Ben Franklin involved in the Hellfire Club. Intellectual elites who want to take over the world and create a new world order. Those guys are all together. I don't care whether you're a Druid, a Wiccan, a witch, a Satanist, a Muslim, a Freemason, Mormon, Roman Catholic. You're all part of the Mystery Babylon system, which all relates back to Nimrod bowing the knee to Satan and making himself into a Nephilim god-man, and who will eventually be destroyed. So, that's our quick overview of the Mystery Babylon system. And so, now we can sort of move forward into today's topic and material that we haven't had a chance to look at. So, I call this section of our outline Back to the Future now. We were in ancient Babylon, which we see back here. And let's make a distinction here. Here you have Shem, Ham, Japheth, and shortly after that, the Tower of Babel is built. This is Nimrod in the city of ancient Babylon, which is different from Neo-Babylon. Neo meaning new. Right, New Babylon. So, New Babylon, and in the way to help you guys think about it, Tower of Babel, Nimrod, ancient Babylon. Mystery Babylon, founded. Satanism is stylized as a form of religious worship. Neo-Babylon, think about Nebuchadnezzar and the metallic man, the head of gold, the breast of silver, hips of brass, legs of iron, feet of iron and clay, which is a symbol of the Antichrist. That doesn't come along until 600 BC. You've got the ancient Babylon in, about 1800 BC. So you have that, and then from there you get the birth of Jesus Christ and get us into the church age. So now, back to the future, we're going through the law of Jesus Christ on the cross, and after Jesus, it's predicted that into the future, what we now call the church age, that the Antichrist would eventually be revealed on the earth, and that the Nephilim will have returned to the earth. And at the end of that period of time, of the 2,000-year period of time called the church era, the church will be removed from the planet Earth to the Father's house by way of the rapture. And after that, once the church is out of the way, then what can happen, Steve?
The man of sin can be revealed.
The man of sin can be revealed. The son of perdition, whom God will destroy with the brightness of his coming. He's talking about the Antichrist. But that can't happen until after the church. So that means that what we're about to look at now in Revelation chapter 17 isn't something that happened in 70 AD, which is what the preterist so-called Christians claim. Mm-hmm. It's something that hasn't happened yet. So now, we're going to fast forward into the future. Now, John, when he wrote this was 96 AD, while he was in prison on the prison island of Patmos for his crime of preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Caesar found him to be a threat, proclaiming that there's another king. Mm-hmm. But God supernaturally prevented Caesar from killing him because God needed him alive to write the book of Revelation, which is the final book of the Bible. All the other followers of Jesus, Peter, Paul, James, they're all dead. They've all been martyred now. John is the only one of the original disciples left alive. All the others have been killed. So here's, the counterpoint to the prosperity gospel that's being promoted in Hollywood. By the way, I added another video. Did you guys see the video I put up on the Kanye West gospel? If you haven't seen that, go on the Facebook South Beach Gospel Ministries Facebook page. I uploaded an interesting video by the same guy that did the tithing video that has explored this phenomenon that's now spreading throughout the Hollywood entertainment industry, the gospel of Kanye West, who now claims to be a born-again Christian. And now he's promoting a Hollywood, endorsed form of Christianity. Brad Pitt says this is wonderful. the talk show hosts who hate Jesus. Even The View that hates Jesus and attacks anyone that shows up on that show that promotes the idea that Jesus is Lord had Kanye West's wife, Kim Kardashian, on, and she was like, oh yes, Kanye, after he had his nervous breakdown, he became a born-again Christian.
She used the word. She used the
I almost fell through the floor.
Wow.
I swear to go on South Beach Gospel Ministries Facebook page and scroll down a couple of posts and you'll see what's going on with Kanye West is the name of the video. And you'll see the footage of him leading church service at Howard University.
I saw that.
And talking, and one of his complaints is this, and the reason why I'm segueing into this is that this is a manifestation of the ancient Babylonian mystery Babylon religion being restylized, just as Jesus said in Matthew 24, and Paul said in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, a strong delusion will come along, and there'll be a false form, not of paganism. Paganism is already false. There'll be a false form of Christianity on the earth after the rapture of the church, and it will become the religious system whereby the Antichrist and his religious strongman, the false prophet, who may be the Roman Catholic Pope, will unite the whole world together in a pseudo-Christian cult that will unite all the religions of the world. It's my contention in the convention of this video that Kanye West is laying the foundation for that. The Justin Bieber's Hillsong. Ben and I went to visit the Blue Church, which is kind of associated with the Hillsong churches. The Australian minister who founded it was convicted of several counts of pedophilia and handed ministry over to a son, Brian Houston, who then spread it on to Selena Gomez and Justin Bieber and all the Hollywood hoi polloi. But Kanye West is now doing his own thing. And so and if you look on the video that I posted, you'll see he's angrily saying, well, Christians come to me and say, nah, man, you can't be saved and stuff like that, because you're talking about, getting all the people together. He said, don't talk to me about the fact that, well, the Mormons got another book other than the Bible. I don't want to hear that. Don't tell me that the Catholics do this. I don't want to hear that. We all believe in Jesus. Y'all Christians are trying to make it too hard to be part of this, as he called it, part of this. What is this? This New Age fake Christianity. He said, y'all are making it too hard to be part of this. He said, people come, if you believe in Jesus and you believe Jesus loves you, that's the gospel. Isn't that the gospel? How dare you say that something else is required? How dare you raise the fact that Mormons have the Book of Mormon instead of the Bible? I don't care about that. If they say Jesus is their Lord, then we're all brothers and sisters. He's promoting a new false, new age form of, not pagan religion, but Christianity. A paganized Christianity. And when I saw his wife on The View, and Joy Behar, she hates Christianity with her whole heart, man. You could see her sitting, she was sitting next to Kim, and she was just glaring at her, but you could tell the controllers who control the corporations that control all the TV shows and own all the television networks told her to keep your mouth shut. This is our program, and we're promoting it through Jesus. I don't care what your personal feelings about the real Jesus is. This is our Jesus that we created, so you'll keep your mouth shut. So she didn't say a word to criticize. She just kind of sat there and looked. But she hates Jesus, and she criticizes people who invoke his name every time she gets an opportunity. But she said nothing. Why? Because this isn't the real Jesus of the Bible, boys and girls. This is the Mystery Babylon Jesus of ancient Babylonian paganism, restylized and laying the foundation for the rise of the Antichrist. So you got to go check that video out, and it'll be an eye-opener for you. So now we're at a point in time where ancient Mystery Babylon of Nimrod and Semiramis and Tammuz is remanifested again after the departure of the church and the rapture, and that's where we pick it up at Revelation chapter 17. Steve, if you would, read for us Revelation chapter 17, run from verse 3 through verse 18 for me.
So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of all harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And these are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples, and multitudes, and nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate, and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
Wow, now what is the great city? And this is where we get into the tricky part.
Yeah.
That verse that Steve read, I remember when we taught this in 2016, during the presidential elections or whatever, I said, when Steve read that, I said, it reminds me of that pop group from the 1980s, Don Was. He had a group called Was Not Was, and they had a big hit or whatever, and I was like, every time I hear this being read, I think of Don Was and, his hit group, and you call it Was Not Was. I was like, that's the most confusing title I've ever heard for a pop group, and that's the most confusing Bible prophecy verse. There are 4 kings. Read that again, Steve.
Which one, Herc? What do you want to pick up?
There are 4 kings.
And there were 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So
Oh, no, I see. It's in verse 8. Let's see. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of earth, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is.
And so what we have here, you're looking at Revelation 17, the beast that was, verse 8, the beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. There's that word again. And they that dwell upon the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they should behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. Verse 9, here's the mind that has wisdom. You would need a mind of wisdom to figure out what that says. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Verse 11, and the beast which thou sawest are 10, and the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns that thou sawest are 10 kings, which have not received the king. And I'm like, what? What is this talking about? Verses 10 and 11 are as confusing as anything. It talks about there are 7 kings, but then there's 7 mountains. And so, Mystery Babylon, what exactly is it? There's an argument made that Mystery Babylon is a religious system, but it's also a city. Now, Dave Hunt, a great Bible apologist and prophecy writer, says, and he makes a compelling, persuasive argument that the city, the most famous city sitting on 7 hills in the world is what?
Rome.
Rome, built on the 7 Palatine hills of Rome. Most famous 7-hilled city in the world. He says that the seat of Mystery Babylon is the ancient Roman Empire's headquarters city, the city of Rome. And he lays all that out in excellent detail in a book I would highly recommend to all of you called A Woman Rides the Beast. And if you see depicted on the cover is the picture of that woman from Revelation who is riding on the beast, and he quotes, the angel said, I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast, quoting Revelation 17:7, which Steve just read to us. And he says, the woman riding the beast is none other than the Mystery Babylon religious system reconstituted as a pseudo-cultic false form of Christianity known as the Roman Catholic Church. And so here's that book, book, got a lot of information in it, so I would strongly recommend you guys pick up from Dave Hunt's ministry, The Berean Call, Harvest House Publishers. Harvest House may have been already bought out by somebody. You know, as Rupert Murdoch probably owns them by now. But you can get A Woman Rides the Beast by Dave Hunt from the Berean Call .org ministry. He makes a persuasive argument that the city in question in Revelation 17:7 is none other than Rome, because that's the seat of the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, the false form of pseudo-Christianity that he argues is being referenced in Revelation 17. But then you have other people, such as Joe Chambers, who says that the seat of the Antichrist will be Mystery Babylon, but that city won't be the city of Rome, it'll be the city of Babylon in modern day Iraq. And then you got Chuck Missler who comes along and takes the position that I take. He says, you know, Dave Hunt delivered his paper in support of, you know, Rome being the city referred to in Revelation 17, the seat of Mystery Babylon. And he said, I was selected by the pre-tribulation, prophecy group, which was a group of biblical scholars who would get together to debate different Bible prophecy issues. And he was to give the counterpoint. He says, when I stood up to give the counterpoint, everyone was surprised because they thought I was going to disagree with Dave to the extent that I believe that Iraq, or the ancient city of Babylon, is really the seat of the Antichrist one world government. He says, I thought both positions were correct, and that's the position that I take. So we'll have Ben, if you would, read Revelation chapter 18 for us, and read for us verse 2, and then 7 through 10, and then 23 and 24, and we'll talk about it. And then we'll try to break down Mystery Babylon. Is Mystery Babylon a religious system, or is it a city? Is it a spirit? Is it a woman? Is it in Rome, or is it in Babylon? Is it literal Babylon, or is it figurative Mystery Babylon? We're going to try to find that out in the next few minutes. So read for us Revelation chapter 18, which is, again, written by John based upon what Jesus and the angel is revealing to John in the book of Revelation. Revelation 17 gives us one version or one vision of the Mystery Babylon system, and a woman riding on a beast, a scarlet woman riding on a scarlet-colored beast. And then in Revelation chapter 18, Mystery Babylon is no longer being referred to as a specific individual woman who's riding on a beast, but it's referred to as a city. Is it a woman or is it a city? Is it a religion? Or is it a meme? Is it a thought? Very confusing, but we're going to unpack that right now. So Revelation chapter 18, which now seems to be referring to Mystery Babylon as a city. And the next question would be, where is the city located? Revelation 18, verse 2, Ben?
And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird.
Verse 7?
How much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow.
Okay, now hold on a minute. Now wait a minute. I thought I was talking about a city. Wait, it's talking about a woman who's a queen, who says, what?
I'm the widow.
I'm the widow. Who's she talking? Who's it?
It's gotta be Semiramis.
It's gotta be Semiramis.
Mhm.
This has got to be the Queen of Heaven that the Roman Catholic Church worships,
Mhm.
that Masonic religion worships. It says, who weeps for the widow's son? And she's saying, my son is back from the dead. I'm no widow. Why? Because her dead son Tammuz, the Antichrist, has been resurrected. Why? Because we found out in the book of Revelation, a little bit earlier, Revelation 13, I think it is, Antichrist is assassinated at the midway point of the tribulation period, 70th week of Daniel, and is supernaturally resurrected after going down into Tartarus and being possessed by the devil himself. And all the enemies of the Antichrist, we find out in the book of Daniel, says, who's like unto the Antichrist? And who can make war with this guy? If he comes back from the dead, we got no choice but to bow down and worship him. And that's what this woman, who is also a city, but is also a spiritual system, and I've said in the past, it's Satan dressed in drag. Satan is one of those guys. He's the queen diva, like Loki in Avengers 1. Is the diva, the dame of the ball. He puts on a production, and he wants to play all the roles. So he's the handsome prince. He's the beautiful damsel. He's also all of the other sub-characters. So we have Satan in the form of the Queen of Heaven boasting, I am no queen. I said a queen. I am no widow. Meaning, I used to be a widow, weeping for Tammuz. You don't have to weep for Tammuz anymore because Tammuz is back from the dead, and now he's ruling over the world. And since he's my son, I get to rule with him as the Queen of Heaven, since I married my own son, which is what Semiramis actually did thousands of years ago. And so, it has to be referring to Semiramis, or the Queen of Heaven, whom the Roman Catholics wrongly call the Virgin Mary. Verse 9, Ben, and 10.
And the kings of the earth, who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her, and lament for her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city! For in 1 hour is thy judgment come.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, I thought it was a woman who was a queen. It is a city. Because it says, the kings of the earth who have committed fornication. You commit fornication not with cities, but with women. So it's a woman in verse 9. And delicious sounds like a harlot, a prostitute. Yeah, that's what she's characterized as, the mother of harlots. But in verse 10, talking about the same topic, standing afar off for fear of her torment. So we're not talking about just any one individualized woman. It's also saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour thy judgment has come. Seems to be referring to both a woman and a city as the same entity, the same mystery Babylon. And then verse 23, Ben, and 24.
And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth.
Doggone, man, I'll tell you what. There's got to be an interpretation that countenances both the fact that it's a city and a woman and a religious system and a false form of Christianity. Verse 23 makes reference to, for by thy sorceries were the nations deceived. Sorcery there in the Greek is pharmakeia, which can be translated drugs or witchcraft or both. Through witchcraft and drugs, the Antichrist will take control over the nations of the earth, I believe, through a false religious system headquartered in Rome, where the Roman Catholic Church is, but then relocated to ancient Babylon, and eventually coming back in the form of the Antichrist. Because what happens? Antichrist comes to power by using a false form of Christianity, headed up by the false prophet, who I think is the Roman Catholic Pope. One of them, if not the current one, then the next one. And all the religions of the world will be united together under a form of pseudo-Christian cultism, which is what Roman Catholicism is, an ecumenical movement to unite all the religions of the world together. And once that's done, the false prophet, the Pope, will declare a revelation, We now understand the New Age translations of the Bible. Now that we got rid of all those Texas Receptive King James Bibles, we can now understand this guy not only is the greatest world leader, but he's actually the Messiah in fulfillment of all the Old Testament prophecies. He is the Jewish Messiah and the Savior of the world. He's Krishna. He is the 12th Imam. He is the Mahdi. He is the Christ consciousness that the New Age is waiting for. He is the person who will unite the world together. And with the imprimatur of the head of this false religious system, which the Bible refers to as Mystery Babylon, he will get the whole world to wonder after this false prophet, this false leader, the false Messiah, the Antichrist, especially after he is exalted to a position of authority and then he gets assassinated. But what happens after the assassination is that he comes back to life again, a resurrection from the dead. And when that's done, he is now exalted beyond being just the messianic world leader. He is now demanding that he be worshipped as God in human flesh. And once that happens, he no longer needs the woman. So what Steve read to us in Revelation 17 is going to happen. God's going to put it in the heart of this man who isn't just a man. He is the Antichrist, the biogenetic descendant of Satan. He's going to put it in the heart of the Antichrist. You don't need false Christianity anymore. We don't like Christians anyway. Not that any of these are real Christians, but even the name of Christ and pretending to be Jesus is offensive. You are going to do away with the false religious harlot system. Mystery Babylon turns into a fake Christian religion. You don't need it anymore because people are not going to worship you as God. And I am going to live inside your body. Satan is a fallen angel. He's not a human being. He doesn't have a regular full-time physical body. He's going to inhabit the avatar. The flesh and blood biogenetic machine that is the Antichrist will be inhabited by the spirit of Satan himself so that he can walk and talk and breathe and communicate in the same way that Jesus was a physical manifestation of the God of Israel. The Antichrist will be a physical manifestation of the prince of the power of the air, the God of this world, Satan. And so he's going to do away with the whore and discard her. And that's what we see happen in Revelation 17 and 18. But let's go back to Revelation 17. Steve read that for us. Very confusing. We're going to try to break that down for you. Okay, so chapter 17 of the book of Revelation is comparable to the book of Daniel that seems to parallel this coming of the Antichrist. He is part and parcel of a number of different entities. Okay, and so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 basic interpretations of what these verses mean. Let's kind of take a look at the ones that I thought that were most instructive. The Mark Hitchcock, John Walvoord interpretation of Revelation 17, 9 through 11. Read that for us again, Steve. Revelation 17, 9, 10, and 11.
And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition.
Okay, so Mark Hitchcock, one of the great Bible prophecy writers of today, graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary. John Walvoord, who was sort of the godfather of pre-tribulation dispensational Bible prophecy scholars, who was the president of Dallas Theological Seminary, who has passed away now. Their interpretation of that passage from Revelation 17 is as follows: that there are kingdoms and kings, and the 8 that Steve made reference to are by number. 1, the Egyptian Empire, which was ruled over by the pharaohs, a line of Egyptian kings. 2, Assyria, which is a kingdom founded by Nimrod himself, ruled over by a series of Assyrian kings. 3, Neo-Babylon, which is not ancient Babylon, but the Neo-Babylon of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they were thrown into the fiery furnace because they refused to bow down, ruled over by King Nebuchadnezzar, who eventually converted to the God of Israel. That's the 3rd king and kingdom. The 4th kingdom being made reference to in Revelation 17, 9 to 11, according to Walvoord and Hitchcock, would be the Medo-Persian Empire, and we see that depicted in our metallic man statue. And since my metallic man is on the back of this, we'll flip it over and show it to you later. But yes, number 4 would be the Medo-Persian Empire, ruled over by Cyrus the Great and Darius the Mede. The Persians ruled the first half of it, but they united through marriage with the Medes. So the Medes and the Persians became Media-Persia, an even more powerful empire. The 5th kingdom and king referred to in this passage would be the kingdom of Greece, ruled over by none other than
Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great, who was the great leopard, who conquered the world faster than anybody ever. The 6th king and kingdom would be none other than what we would call Rome I. Rome was ruled over by a series of kings known as the Caesars. That would be the 6th. The 7th king and kingdom would be Rome II, or the revived Roman Empire, ruled over by 10 kings and the beginning of the New World Order. And that hasn't happened yet. We're in the process of seeing the Roman Empire being revived, and it's believed that, starting out as the old European Common Market was 10 nations, that the world will be divided into 10 regions, and there'll be a regional governor or a king over each one of those regional areas. You've got the European Union, the North American Union, the North American Union, and then the South American Union will be South America, and Mexico, I think, is part of the North American Union, and so on and so forth. And then the 8th king or kingdom would be the final one world government of the Gentiles, which will be ruled over by a king who John refers to as that entity known as the Antichrist. That's the Hitchcock-Walbert interpretation. So now we're going to take a look at specifically the view of the 7 kings. And if we could, let's have Ben read for us Daniel chapter 2, verse 28 through 49. That's a big chunk of passage, and that's going to make reference to the metallic man. And I'm going to flip over there right now, and it's what Chuck Missler refers to as Daniel's 4+1. So again, we're going deep, deep, deep into Bible prophecy, but this is all tangential and related to the Antichrist himself. So it's a lot of material, but we got to go through it. So if you would, Ben, read those passages for us. Again, read for me Revelation chapter 10, Revelation 17, verse 10, and then Daniel 28 through 49. Start out with Revelation 17:10.
Revelation 17:10, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space.
I submit to you that short space will be the last 3.5 years of the 70th week of Daniel. Now, if you would, pop up to Daniel chapter 2, Ben, written about 600 years earlier. Daniel the prophet, who was in ancient Babylon, Neo-Babylon, towards the end of the Babylonian Empire, and then he was there for the transition into the Medo-Persian Empire. He wrote this prophetically in Daniel chapter 2, verse 28 and 49, about a strange dream that King Nebuchadnezzar, who eventually converted, I believe, to the God of Israel, had. And we're going to look at a depiction of what it is that he had a dream about.
But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh
Start out from the very beginning then. What verse did you
That was Daniel 2:28.
Start at 25.
Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, that will make known unto the king the interpretation.
Interpretation of a dream. The king had a dream, and he couldn't remember what the dream was, and it disturbed him so much that he said, I want the soothsayers that I got on the royal payroll to interpret the dream for me, because it's made me sleepless, and I'm really worried. And so, the magicians on staff said, okay, king, tell us what the dream was, and we'll interpret it up for you. He's like, no. Any moron could do that. I want you to tell me what the dream was, since you have such magical powers, and then tell me what the interpretation of the dream is. Like, that's impossible. We can't tell you what the dream was. He said, then you're all going to die tomorrow. You better find a guy amongst your class that can tell me what my dream was by tomorrow morning, or you're all dead. Now, Daniel who was part of these magi, these special enlightenment ones, because Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were taken captive in Israel, from Israel into Babylon at the destruction of the original temple during the fall of the southern kingdom of Israel during the Babylonian captivity, were on the king's payroll because they were smart and God was blessing them in many areas, so he made them part of the wise men group, the magi. And so none of the other pagan soothsayers and astrologers and wise men could interpret the dream. And then they got to Daniel, and God revealed the dream to him, and that's where Ben's picking us up at.
Continue from where I was, or jump to 28.
Where you were. Just run right through.
The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king, and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the later days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for these, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter, and he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation of the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, this great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven shall he give into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom, inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, forsomuch as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, forsomuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Forsomuch as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. When the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel, and said, Oh, of a truth it is, that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of
Let
Babylon.
me stop you right there. So, what verse were you at there, Ben?
49.
Okay. All right. So then what we just heard Ben read was 600 years earlier, Daniel had an interaction with King Nebuchadnezzar where he interpreted the dream of the king. And the dream was of the metallic man that I just showed you guys on the diagram. Head of gold is you, Nebuchadnezzar, and then there are going to be other kingdoms that come after you. Chuck Missler refers to this as Daniel's 4 plus 1. This is what Grant Jeffrey says, that these two passages, Revelation 17:10 and Daniel chapter 2, verses 28 through 49, the metallic man dream, this is what he says means with regards to the kings and kingdom. He says that the 7 that's made reference to is the first kingdom, first main kingdom. He said these are basically 7 major kingdoms in the history of the world. The first great one being the Egyptian Empire, followed by 2, the Assyrian Empire. 3rd, the Babylonian Empire, referring to the Neo-Babylonian Empire. 4th, Persia. 5th, Greece. 6th, Rome 1. 7th, Rome 2. And again, as I said, Chuck Missler refers to it as Daniel's 4 plus 1. It will be Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, plus Rome revived, will give you the Daniel chapter 2, verses 28 through 49, metallic man dream with the head of gold, breast of silver, all the way down to the feet, which would been read and said it was partly iron, partly clay, miry clay. It says, they shall mingle themselves with the seed zera, the Hebrew word for spermatozoa. They will mingle their DNA with the seed or DNA of men, meaning that they that's doing the mingling has to be something other than, Ben's a writer from Harvard, has to be something other than men, right? If the they are mingling there, and it's personal pronoun, this isn't an entity that's a disembodied figure like a car or a truck, it's a they, mingling their DNA with the DNA of human beings, meaning they must be non-human beings who can interbreed. And I think that that is, again, the fulfillment of the prophecy regarding the return of the Nephilim that's first predicted in Genesis chapter 6, 1 through 4. So, Daniel 4 plus 1, he says, Babylonian Empire, Persian Empire, Greece Empire, Rome divided out into 2. The original Roman Empire of Jesus' day, followed by the revived Roman Empire of the Antichrist. Now, if you would, Steve, we'll run through Daniel chapter 7, 1 through 7. Again, relating to kingdoms, and these are all relating to the kingdom of the Antichrist of the last days. You can't look at Revelation 17 without really looking at Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 8, Daniel chapter 7. And we'll get to a lot of it tonight, but Daniel chapter 7, verses 1 through 7, if you would, Steve.
In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed.
Let me stop you right there. So now Daniel, here's the Lord working in mysterious ways. Daniel receives a dream. Parenthetically, it's the same dream that God revealed to Nebuchadnezzar, but it's being received differently. Why? Because Nebuchadnezzar was a pagan, and Daniel was a man of God. So the things we see as shiny, bright, cool, a metallic man with a head of gold, so sexy, so beautiful, so wonderful. That's because he had a worldly Nebuchadnezzar pagan view. Daniel, seeing things as God sees these successive world empires of man, eventually to be ruled over by Antichrist, as wild beasts, dangerous and terrible things. And so Steve is going to give us basically a view of the same kingdoms, the histories of the world. These are the kingdoms of the world before Antichrist sits the throne to be eventually destroyed by the stone cut out of the mountain without hands, which is a prophetic reference to
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ, yes, sir. And so, pick us up there, Ben, Steve.
Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold another beast, a second, like to a bear.
The first one, the lion, Babylonian Empire. The second one, the bear, Media Persia.
And it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl.
Stop it right there. Who did we say the leopard was?
Alexander the Great.
Because he conquered the world so fast, he was quick as a leopard. But he's got 4 wings on his back, making reference to his
The generals.
4 generals. When he was dying, he got dysentery or some, I forgot whether it was dysentery or what the disease was. He contracted by drinking water in maybe Africa or one of the countries that he conquered, and he died really quickly at a young age. And as he was on his deathbed, they came to him and said, Who rules over the kingdom now? You got the biggest kingdom on earth. Who rules over the kingdom? Who do you want to bequeath it to? He said, give it to the strong. And so his 4 generals fought it out amongst themselves. And his 4 generals were, I think we're here should be able to tell you, you should memorize it. Cassander, Ptolemy, Seleucus, and
Cassander. Sorry.
Cassander, Seleucus, Ptolemy, and
Cassander.
Cassander, Seleucus, Ptolemy, and
Lysimachus.
Lysimachus, that's right. Ptolemy got Egypt. More importantly, Seleucus got Judea. It was his grandson who was the Antiochus Epiphanes. He was the head of the Seleucid Empire that became a forerunner of the Antichrist by defiling the rebuilt temple. But go ahead, Ben. Steve, I digress.
The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it.
Roman Empire, 63 BC, boys and girls. And
it had 10 horns.
10 horns. That's not only the original Roman Empire, but the revived Roman Empire, which apparently seems to suggest it will be divided out into 10 regions that will eventually be united together by the Antichrist. So, you read through all of it, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's take a look at what Steve just read for us. Okay, the 4 beasts or kingdoms are 7 heads or 7 kings. We found out that heads and crowns are kingdoms and kings. Daniel 1 through 7, 1 through 7. The lion, the one head, Neo-Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar. The bear, Medo-Persia. The leopard, 4 heads, Greece, which eventually, upon the death of Alexander the great leopard, was divided out into his kings. And Steve didn't even have to look at the cheat sheet. Alexander's kingdom was divided to his 4 generals, Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. The 4th kingdom, or king, was the terrible beast, the one-headed beast of Rome. This will equal 4 beasts with a total of 7 heads. So you got 1 head here, 1, 2, 4 heads here, 5, 6, so you got 6, and then you got the 7th head, which is Rome. So that's where you get the 7 heads. So they say, yeah, the 7 heads referred to in Revelation 17 and Daniel 7 are these kings. So now we'll flip over to another interpretation, the other interpretation of Adrian Rogers, one of my favorite Baptist Bible teachers, who's now again deceased. All the good Bible teachers are gone. He says, Revelation 17:10. Read that one more time, Steve.
Oh, yeah.
I got it.
There you go, man.
Go ahead, Ben.
And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space.
Adrian Rogers says that would be 1, Augustus, Claudius, 3, Caligula, 4, Tiberius, 5, Nero. all of these are the kings of Rome. He's saying these are all making reference to the Caesars. And he says at the time the book of Revelation was written by John in 96 AD, as of 96 AD, 5 were fallen. Augustus was dead, Claudius was dead, Caligula was dead, Tiberius was dead, Nero was dead. And as of 96 AD, when John was writing this down, one is, the 6th would be Domitian, who was the Caesar who was alive at the time John wrote the book of Revelation. And then he says, the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. That 7th is referring to the coming Antichrist, and the short space will be the 42 months that he rules over the whole world as the king of the world, as the Antichrist. And then finally, the 5 fallen kings of Chuck Missler, he says that Revelation 17:10 is referring to Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and Greece. I like that interpretation. Egypt being a great world power, Assyria being a world, there were other kingdoms, but these were the 5 predominant ones: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and Greece. And then the one that is Rome 1, and he agrees that the other that has not yet come is arrived Rome 2, which would be the seat of the Antichrist government. So these are the 5 primary, 5 predominant interpretations of Revelation 17, which is a complicated biblical passage. The bottom line is, though, in each one of them, we can agree, whether you think number 1 is Egypt, or you think number 1 is Neo-Babylon, or whether we know that everybody agrees that the final king who has not yet come is the Antichrist. And we find out that, there was an argument that there is the question between, is the city where these kings rule over, is it the city of Rome, as Dave Hunt says in his book, A Woman Rides the Beast? He says the Roman Catholic Church is headquartered in Rome, which is a city built on 7 hills. Revelation 17 and 18 has to be referring to the city of Rome in Italy, the seat of the old Roman Empire, and will be the seat of the New World Order. On the other hand, Joe Chambers says, nah. He says it's ancient Babylon. And he makes some pretty compelling arguments for that as well. And if we could, I'd like to just have you, whichever one of you guys finds it first, let me see if I can get you guys to take a look at Micah chapter 5, verses 5 and 6. We don't get Micah every day. Making reference to a passage that some people believe is referring to the Antichrist himself, but by a different title. This is what Joe Chambers emphasizes in his position, that ancient city of Babylon is the headquarters of the city that's destroyed in Revelation 18, that is glorified in Revelation 17. He says it's Babylon, and he takes Micah chapter 5, verse 5 and 6 as the reason why.
And this man shall be the peace, when the Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. And they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod, and the entrance thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian, when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our borders.
What Joe Chambers says, Paul Creek Ministry pastor says, he says the Assyrian is another idiom for the Antichrist. Antichrist, he says, comes from Assyria. Assyria is analogous to the plain of Shinar, which is where Babylon was headquartered. It says, the land of Nimrod. It actually says right in, Micah refers to it as the land of Nimrod. Syria and the land of Nimrod, Shinar and Babylon are all synonymous. And we find out a little bit later, in fact last week we had looked at the wicker basket, the prophecy of the wicker basket, where there was a vision given to the prophet, Steve? Zechariah, that's right. That was one of the last ones we looked at. Zechariah receives the prophecy vision of a woman with stork wings. And she wasn't a human being because she had wings. But storks are unclean animals under the law of Moses in God's eyes. And she had wings. And she was put in a big giant wicker basket. And she was being carried by these female angels with unclean stork wings. And, Zechariah said, where are they carrying the woman in the basket? And he said, to the plain of Shinar, to build her an house. The plain of Shinar is the same as Babylon. And so let's go to our videotape here, and let's take a look here at our trusty dusty Middle East chart. And I took, the liberty of marking out ancient Babylon and Assyria. These were the city-states founded by Nimrod. And you see, here we have the land of ancient Mesopotamia, which included regions or provinces: Babylonia, Sumer, Elam, Assyria, Haran. So you had Assyria that had the cities of Nimrod, named after who? Nimrod.
Of course.
The city of Nimrod, because he was the founder. And he also founded the sister city, Nineveh, which is, the Ninevites did some wicked and evil things. Remember, God sent Jonah, like, man, those people are wicked. They deserve to go to hell. I'm not telling them about the gospel. I want them to be damned. And God said, no, you go. Because the Ninevites would take you and skin you alive and let the insects eat your flesh while you were tortured to death. So that's the city founded by none other than Nimrod. And then down the river, the Euphrates River, Tigris and Euphrates River, here's the Euphrates River, and here's the Tigris. And they run down this fertile plain, and eventually you get to the city of Babylon, which is right here on the Euphrates River. This is where the Tower of Babel was built, right here. Now, in comparison to that is the city of Jerusalem in Israel, which is over here. So remember we talked about the kings of the east.
Mm-hmm.
They saw a star in the east and went to worship him or whatever. So they actually came from the east. It didn't mean that they looked in the east and saw the eastern star, because that would have sent the wise men from Babylon into Persia, Media, and eventually into Europe or something. No, when they were in the east, they saw the star of the Lord, which was in the western sky, over here to the west. So they went westward, which is why the Order of the Eastern Star, that Illuminati symbol, the 5-pointed star with the multiple colors, it's really a satanic organization, because they call themselves the Eastern Star because they know that's the counterpoint to Jesus.
Yeah.
But it's done in such a subtle way because most people don't understand it. When they saw the star in the east, didn't mean that the Magi looking for Jesus were looking into the east. They were actually looking into the west. So the star of the birth of the Messiah is the Western Star, not the Eastern Star. But to trick people who are not initiated into the occult, they call themselves the daughters of the Eastern Star. Like, oh, that's a reference to Luke when the wise men saw the star in the east and went to worship it. No. The star was in the west. They were in the east when they saw it, and then they went west. Go west, young man. But anyway, okay, here you go. So this is the ancient city of Babylon. Joe Chambers says that passage from Micah means that, combined with the passage from Zechariah, means that the headquarters of the Antichrist will be ancient Babylon. And eventually, it says, when the Assyrian, because he's coming from the region of Assyria, which includes the city of Babylon, shall come into our land, boom, to destroy invade our temple, which means the temple's got to be rebuilt. And here it is again, modern day. This is, again, the city of Baghdad, where all the fighting was going on in 1991, and so on and so forth. Here's the Babylonian plain, where the city of Babylon existed on the banks of the Euphrates River, and now in modern day Iraq. Here's Syria. This is where you have all the trouble with the issues that's been going on with the Kurds, right? And the Syrians and the Turks. That's right, sort of up in this region right here. So this is in the news every day right now. This is Syria. Here's Damascus. Here's Baghdad. Here's Babylon. Here's modern day Jerusalem in Israel. And so it's believed by Joe Chambers and others, Antichrist will set up a headquarters here because of Zechariah chapter 5, I think it was, and he will go from Babylon, which will become the seat of Antichrist, into Jerusalem, invade the land, and then set up his new headquarters in the temple. I take the Chuck Missler approach. I think they're both right. I think Dave Hunt is right that the Mystery Babylon religious system is the Queen of Heaven, a woman, not the literal woman Semiramis, but the spirit of the woman Semiramis, who inhabits the Roman Catholic Church, who worships their god or goddess, the Queen of Heaven, the so-called Virgin Mary. Headquartered on the city of Seven Hills, which we clearly see referred to, because it says, this city is drunk with the blood of the martyrs of the Lord. Babylon's not drunk with the martyrs of the Lord. The Lord hadn't come yet. There were no Christians at the time that Babylon ceased to exist. Peter went to the area to preach, but he wasn't martyred there. So Dave Hunt makes an excellent and compelling point when he says it's got to be Rome, because during the Inquisition and those times when the Roman Catholic Church had armies, they could go into cities and kill people that wouldn't bow the knee to the Pope. And the Albigenses and the Valdenses and the Huguenots were evangelical Christians like us who refused to bow the knee to the Roman imperialistic state church system that had as ruler over it not Jesus Christ, but the Latin term, I know a little Latin, I studied before I went to law school, Vicarius Christi, which is a Latin way of saying what, Ben?
Vicar of Christ.
Vicar of Christ is the anglicized version of it, but what does it literally mean?
In place of Christ.
That's exactly right. Vicarius Christi in Latin, in Greek, is pronounced Antichristos. In English, it's the same thing as saying Antichrist. Not necessarily and only against Christ, but somebody who stands in place of. That's why, these Hollywood stage moms are living vicariously through their children. That's why they push them into the entertainment industry, no matter how it destroys their mental health, because they're living vicariously through them. And that's what the term Vicarius Christi means. It means the one who is standing in the place of Christ. The Pope claims to be the replacement Christ. In Greek, you would say Antichristos. The short and anglicized version of it is Antichrist. Antichrist isn't just opposed to the real Jesus Christ. He's coming to the earth disguised as the real Jesus Christ. That's the Jesus I would submit to you that Kanye West is promoting in that video I put on our Facebook page this week. That is the Jesus of Kanye West. That's the Jesus of Justin Bieber. That's the Jesus that gets thanked by every Hollywood star of stage and screen when they get an award. I want to thank God, and specifically Jesus, not the Jesus of the Bible, the Jesus of the New Age that is part and parcel of the Roman Church, the Vicarius Christi system. And so that's what we're looking at. Ben, you look like you were getting ready to make a comment.
No,
Okay, so here we go. Looking back at our map again.
there was Saddam Hussein, I think as Hunt pointed out, considered himself the second Nebuchadnezzar, and he was rebuilding Babylon.
Rebuilding Babylon and redid the gate. I forgot the name of the gate. The main entrance gate into the city of ancient Babylon was actually rebuilt at a cost of tens of millions of dollars by Saddam Hussein. And he put actually the inscription on the bricks and actually minted a gold coin. On one side was his head, on the other side was the head of King Nebuchadnezzar, whom he felt he was a descendant of. So, again, we find out then that Dave Hunt could be right, because the Roman Catholic Church put to death hundreds, if not millions, of evangelical Christians throughout the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, throughout the Inquisitions, because they wouldn't bow the knee to the Pope. That can't be Babylon. That has to be Rome. Dave Hunt is right. But, as Chuck Missler points out, I believe Joe Chambers is right as well. Because in Zechariah we find out that this unclean woman, which is another way of saying Mystery Babylon, not just Semiramis, but the whole religious system that arose from out of Semiramis' I'm the Queen of Heaven, worship me, I'm a goddess thing, it got moved from where it was at to a new place. I think that verse is saying that it goes from the city of Rome, spiritually, out of the city of Rome, the Vatican, and is relocated as the headquarters of the Antichrist in ancient Babylon because of such ties
Back to where it started.
The ancestral homeland of the whorish, harlot, mystery Babylon system returns to its ancestral home. It's taken it to the plain of Shinar to build it in house. Plain of Shinar is right here, where Babylon and Assyria is. And if that's the case, a new headquarters for the Antichrist, Maybe after the Roman Catholic Church is destroyed, maybe the Vatican is blown up in some way. God causes the Antichrist to destroy Rome and the Vatican. And now, the one world worship the Antichrist system is relocated from the religious city and home that the Antichrist needed to be in when he needed the Pope to help him, from Rome, relocated to the ancient ancestral homeland of Satanism, ancient Babylon, where the Tower of Babel was, where Satan had his first throne, the Stargate, Tower of Babel, right there. In modern day, here it is, right here in Iraq. And so I believe that the Antichrist will build his new headquarters here after moving it from Rome, and eventually when Micah chapter 5, verses 5 and 6 is fulfilled, Antichrist will come from out of the rebuilt city of Iraq, of Babylon in Iraq, and move westward into Israel, into the city of Jerusalem, where he will now inhabit the rebuilt temple as the Messiah God King of the Jews. Worship me or die. And he's going to go into the Holy of Holies of the rebuilt temple, which he's going to allow to be rebuilt, so that he can declare himself to be the Messiah and the God of Israel and the God of the world. Here we have, again, we have that wicker basket located here in Babylon. Eventually, it's going to work its way when Antichrist takes over the world back into Jerusalem, when the Assyrians shall come into our land. So, Antichrist will be coming from the city of Babylon, which is on the plain of Shinar, which is part of ancient Assyria, which is now part of modern Iraq, and both of those prophecies can be true. And that's how you can reconcile Dave Hunt's approach with Revelation 17 being the city of Rome with Joe Chambers' approach of having the city of the Antichrist being headquartered at the ancient city of Babylon. That's how he can be of the Roman Empire. Remember, it says this eighth king is of the seven. What does that mean? Well, he's of the seven. He's of Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and Revival. Meaning all of the would-be world rulers were all motivated in some way by Satan himself. And he is of the seven. Even he is the eighth, but is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. And meaning he incorporates all of the rulership and all of the leadership and all of the authority of all the other world empires combined together. Satan has always tried to rule the world through men. Through all those other seven kings comes this new eighth king. The Antichrist will be possessed by Satan himself. He will use the city of Rome initially, and he will eventually headquarter himself in Babylon, I believe, and then he will eventually invade Israel from Babylon in Assyria, so that he can be rightly referred to as both a Roman and Daniel chapter 9, the revived Roman Empire. We don't have time to go into the 70th week of Daniel, but when we finish this Antichrist series, we will touch upon that. But for suffice it to say, for now, where we're going to end it, is that Antichrist will be headquartered in Rome, but he'll also be headquartered in ancient Babylon, the literal rebuilt city, as Ben pointed out, that was in the process of being rebuilt even in the 90s by none other than Saddam Hussein. That will eventually be completed, and he will invade Israel from out of the city of Assyria, as Micah prophesied 600 years ago. I mean, at this point, 2,600 years ago. And both will be literally true, so the Bible is not contradictory. And Antichrist will invade. We'll find out the next time when we come back. We're going to I think next week and the week after, we're going to have our 2-week Halloween special. And then we're going to have Ben do a special the first week in November. And then we'll finish up Antichrist. We will pop in with that special class, and we'll start the book of Revelation. So we got a lot of stuff going on with the limited time we have left in this year. And if Joe Chambers is right, he's right about Babylon. He's right about Babylon and the rapture. That means we're closing up shop for the new year, and we'll be at the Father's house. If it isn't, we'll continue on. We got materials coming for evangelism and plans and methods and all of that if we're left behind. I mean, well, if the Lord doesn't come for us. But our blessed hope is that he will. So,
Yes.
Again, to summarize, Mystery Babylon is a woman, Satan dressed in drag, Semiramis, a city, Rome and Italy, Babylon and Iraq, and it's a goddess-based false religious system that really has its roots not just in ancient Babylon, not Neo-Babylon, but ancient Babylon, but even before that, Steve, where?
Garden of
The
Eden.
Garden of Eden, goodness forbid. So, Paul and Jesus forewarned us of these things, and we'll look at that next time. But we'll end it right here because I've taken you. You can't really probably keep up with me for more than 2 hours. It takes a superhuman feat of incredibleness. So we're going to end it right there, and then we will pick it up when we conclude. But next week we'll be doing our special Satanic Roots following, and these topics all tend to start working together because the Holy Spirit has written the Bible in such a way is that as you study and learn one area, it builds upon your knowledge of the other. And I guarantee you, when you start doing stuff like we're doing, studying stuff up, meeting every week, taking notes, sharing outlines, when you get yourself educated up and you're already born again, then the Lord starts supernaturally putting you in positions where, boom, somebody needs the information that you have. God is not giving you this head knowledge. God isn't giving me head knowledge of the Bible just so I can impress my friends when I play biblical-based Trivial Pursuit or something like that. No, He's giving us this information so we can take it out into the world and go to war with it. Just like Maya was saying, I want information in a capsulated form so that when I go out, I can tell people about the rapture. I can tell people about the Antichrist. I can tell them how that fits in to the fall. Genesis chapter 6, the Nephilim. Give it to me in a short, concise form so that I can give it to the people. And that's what we're going to do with our special Masterclass Bible series. So with that then, let's see. Steve, Ben, which one do you guys want to go?
Lord, just thank you again for this little house church, Lord. Just I pray that we all have a heart to be used, Lord, a heart to go out and share what we've learned, just as you showed us here today, Lord, using her to break down some very complicated parts of Scripture, Lord, that we were able to get through and at least get a grasp on, and rely on you to provide us with the boldness and opportunity to go out and share that with folks that need to hear it, whether they be born again or not. But certainly, first and foremost, to share the gospel, but then also to be able to kind of get into some of those deeper parts of Scripture. Lord, again, we thank you for just this little small, humble house church, and for everyone that tuned in tonight, Lord, pray that they not only be hearers of the word, Lord, but go out and be doers. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
All right, so let's check and see if we got a text from anybody. Nope, we're good. Genevieve's watching us online, and so that does it for us. We're good to go. Till next week.